Detroit Pistons beat writer James Edwards III dropped another article where he details the Pistons' best assets and trade chips ahead of the offseason. A lot of insight in this article from James. We'll be breaking it all down and evaluating who he has as the Pistons' top available assets in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Coop Cahill. You can find me over on Twitter at Coop Cahill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. We had just hit 8,000 subscribers. I just checked before this episode. We finally hit it. Thank you, all of you guys, for helping us get there. Now our goal is 9K and eventually get to 10K. So if you haven't already, again, please hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and easier. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So before we even get into today's episode, I'm going to say again, which I've said this multiple times this season, if you don't already have an athletic subscription, you need to get one because James Edwards III, the Detroit Pistons beat writer, does an incredible job covering the team. And almost every article he drops, he is giving you insight. He is giving you breadcrumbs, things to read in between the lines to get an idea of where the Pistons organization is at, where they're going to be heading, what moves they could potentially make. And today he dropped another one, and this one has a lot within this piece. We're going to be breaking it down entirely in today's episode. So later on, we'll talk about the problem with trading Ivy and Duren, so you probably get an idea of where this article is going. But the problem with trading one of Ivy or Duren, or even both of them, and then also the argument for why you should trade them. So we'll evaluate both sides of the argument with this. But let's go ahead and just break down what was said in the article, and then we'll get to that. So James' article, it's titled The Pistons' Best Assets and Trade Chips as an Intriguing 2024 Offseason Approaches. And I know the title basically says that, makes you believe that it's just ranking the Pistons' assets. But if you read the article, I come away feeling like not only is it the Pistons trade assets, it's also a combination of most likely to be traded. So, like, for example, he has Cade Cunningham number one. It's the most valuable, but he also says the Pistons are not trading Cade, obviously. Then he has number two, the Pistons' top draft pick. Now, the Pistons may very well trade that pick. And honestly, I feel like it's likely they will do that. But that's just my opinion. But then later on, next he has Asar Thompson at 3. I just don't see the Pistons moving Asar. And he kind of says that as well in this article. And then moving on, you obviously get to Jalen Duren and Jaylen Ivy, who are 4 and 5. In each category, he has the prized possessions. That's where Cade Cunningham's in. He has the 2024 pick. And then he has Asar in his own category where it's not quite prized possessions, but pretty close. So that pretty much matches what I feel like I've been saying on the podcast. It also matches what James has said in previous articles and on this podcast when he's guested on here, that Cade and Asar, if there were two guys closest to untouchable, it's Cade and Asar. Cade really is basically untouchable. And Asar, it doesn't seem like they value Asar really highly, and they don't want to move off of him. Like, it doesn't sound like they're going to move off of him. I'd be shocked if they did. Then you get to 4 and 5 on the list. He has Jalen Duren 4 and Jaylen Ivy 5. And moving on the list, they also have he has Simone Fontecchio 6A and Isaiah Stewart 6B. That doesn't really matter as much. What I want to focus on is with him having Jaylen Ivy and Jalen Duren 4 or 5. What that says to me, and again, like I say always, I'm not going to spoil the whole article for James because you guys should have a subscription and read it yourselves. But the interesting part is Jaylen Ivy and Jalen Duren, obviously. And what he says within this article makes me feel as though Jaylen Ivy is probably the most likely one to be traded from the Detroit Pistons. That Jaylen Ivy is going, if you had to pick one of the guys, Jaylen Ivy or Jalen Duren, most likely ones to be moved with their pick to get something, it's going to be Jaylen Ivy. Because not only are there questions with Jaylen Ivy's fit next to Cade, like we talked about in last week's episode, I think there's some questions on how good is Jaylen Ivy right now. Like, it's not just about his fit next to K. It's also there's questions being had about how good is Jaylen Ivy, because right now he's struggling after evaluating the season. And James says this on the podcast, or not on the podcast, in this article, that Ivy also has been dealt a really tough hand because of how Monty treated him at the beginning of the year, how he's been handled, etc. All that stuff. That's fair. But there's also been legit questions within the Pistons front office and within the Pistons community about how good Jaylen Ivy is. And it seems as though he is the most likely one to be moved by the Detroit Pistons because of his defensive issues, his streaky shooting, the fact that he can get to the basket, but isn't a great finisher at this point. Decision making isn't all the way there. There just seems to be more questions about Jaylen Ivy than the other young guys right now. And again, I'm trying to explain this, what's really said in this article, without just exposing all of it, because I don't feel right just reading James' whole article on it's spoiling everything for him. But I think if after reading this, first of all, James's articles are doing a really good job of pinning where the Pistons front office is at. But after reading this one, combined with the one he wrote last week that we talked about on the podcast as well, I think I feel pretty confident putting money on this offseason being pretty active. This offseason being pretty crazy for the Detroit Pistons. I think a lot of things are going to happen this offseason. I think there's going to be a lot of changes that happen this offseason. And there's going to be some changes, I think, that are going to be controversial. Like maybe trading Jalen Duren. Like maybe trading Jaylen Ivy. Maybe for a player that isn't, doesn't have the same ceiling as one of those guys. Like I think something like that may and might likely happen this offseason. It's going to be incredibly interesting to watch this offseason. I wanted to, rank the players and how I value the Pistons versus this list. And basically, me and James completely agree. I got Cade 1. I think that top pick is the next highest value asset that the Detroit Pistons have right now. I truly believe the Pistons are going to move on from that. James mentioned it in the article, and I've mentioned it on here before. The Pistons, if they move on from Jaylen Ivy, if they move on from Jalen Duren, it's because they don't feel like they have time now after how bad this season went, and how much urgency, how much pressure they feel to get wins right now. They don't have time to develop yet another top pick youngster on the team. The whole reason behind trading Jaylen Ivy or Jalen Duren would be because you don't have time to develop these guys for them to get to, 2 to 3 years from now when they're legit good players. You need to have some of that impact right now. That would be the whole idea behind it. So do you have time to make that another top pick to develop those guys? That guy with the rest of the guys that you already have? Like, it doesn't make much sense, at least to me. So I do think the Pistons top pick, hopefully it's 1 or 2. Like, hopefully they don't fall to 5 again, because then that would be really, really tough. But I do agree that that's the second most valuable asset the Pistons have. Next, I would have Asar Thompson as well. I would have Jalen Duren 4th, and then I would have Jaylen Ivy 5th. So I agree completely with James' order of assets here. I'd have Jalen Duren above Jaylen Ivy because of his age and because of the skills he's shown at the 5 position when it comes to ball handling and passing. I think that is incredibly useful and needed from a big. And at his young of age, I feel like there's more hope. Like, with how young Duren is, he's really bad defensively. Like, he's really bad. And there is concerns, like legit concerns, that if he can turn it around. But I feel like at that young of age, as a big man, you hope that by the time he's like 23, 24, you can get him to like at least average defensively. Like, that would be why I'd have Duren above Ivy, but then I'd have Ivy right behind Duren, because Ivy also has a high ceiling. So those would be the top 5 guys for me, or the top 5 assets, in my opinion. I would have, honestly, Isaiah Stewart right behind Ivy. And to be honest, I almost feel like Stu might carry more value to certain teams than Ivy. Like, I think Stu might actually get you more, or teams would be more interested in Stu right now for certain teams than Ivy, because Stu, I think, is already a useful player a defender who's hitting threes really well this year, and plays and serves a role as a switchable big that is really important. So I think for certain teams you could argue Stu at 5, but I basically agree with what James said here with his ranking. So read the article, come to your own opinion, then let me know what you guys think. How would you guys rank the Detroit Pistons assets? Should the Pistons move on from Ivy or Duren? Should they attach a pick to them, the top pick to one of them to go make a move? Just what's your thoughts after reading this article from James? Again, a lot of insight within this piece. Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, I want to break down what's the problem. What would be the problem? What's the negative side? What's the counter argument to trading Jalen Duren or Jaylen Ivy? We'll talk about that when we come back. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. That's why you should also be using LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply with linkedin.com/lockedonnba. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So look, these two segments coming up, if you've made it here, stay tuned for these two segments because I think this is probably the most important conversation, and we're going to probably have this conversation 20 times in the offseason. But at least until one of them eventually gets traded or neither of them gets traded. But the problem with this discussion I'm witnessing is that people are lacking a lot of context and they're making it seem black or white. There's a lot of context to it, and it's not as simple as just, oh, trade this guy, trade that guy. Oh, no, it makes no sense to trade that guy. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. That's why we want to spend a segment talking about the problem with doing it, and then I want to spend a segment why you should do it. So the problem that you would have if you wanted to trade Jaylen Ivy, if you do trade Jaylen Ivy, the problem you would have if you do trade Jalen Duren, if you want to trade Jalen Duren, these are the problems that arise here. There's a few issues that you need to consider at this juncture. The first thing is, whether you like it or not, maybe other franchises, other teams would get this pass and don't have to worry about this. But the Pistons, they have to worry about this because of how their history over the last 15 years has been and the fan reaction. I do think they care about fan reaction. I'm going to go out there and say that. I believe they care a little bit, at least a little bit, how fans react to things and how the community at large feels. Maybe not just specific fans, but the community at large feels. And where I'm going with this is you do not want, there is a worry. There is something to be scared about if you trade Ivy, if you trade Duren, and then in 3 to 4 years, they're awesome. And then the trade that you made, the guy that you brought in, didn't help you move forward. If you trade Ivy or Duren and they go on to be awesome, and then the guy you bring back, either one, doesn't help you win immediately, or two, falls off the cliff in like a year or two and doesn't help you get to like this next step of why you'd be moving them, you would never survive. Your job might be over before you even get it. Like the rumors of the Pistons getting a GM or someone to oversee Troy Weaver as the president of basketball operations. If that was one of the first moves they made and then that happened, like it'd be over with. You're basically setting yourself up to get fired within like 2 years. Like you would see another regime just have to take over because that would be an unforgivable mistake. And that's something that you have to be careful about because it would kill you. It would legit cost you your job, I believe. So that's the first problem with trading Jalen Duren or Jaylen Ivy, is that you have to be concerned about, will they make you pay for it in like 4 years? The second thing is, if you trade Jaylen Ivy or Jalen Duren, the only way that you do this, and I do think this is going to happen, which is why I've been an advocate of trading one of them. And heck, I wouldn't even be against trading both of them if it got you something crazy. But the reason why I've become an advocate, because I do think this is going to happen. But if you trade one of them, you better have other moves lined up to be good next year, because that is the only argument for moving on from one of these guys. If you are not, and I think the Pistons are at this point, and all the beat writers have signaled that they're at this point, and like jobs are on the line, and major things are on the line. So they are at this point. I feel pretty confident saying they are at this point, but you still have to execute it. But my point is, if you trade one of these guys, you better have other moves set up and ready to make that will make you a much better team next year. Because if you were to trade one of these guys and that's the only move you make, one of the only moves you make, and then the other moves you're making aren't that impactful, and then the Pistons next year are not better, you failed. Not only did you risk some of the future, because by trading Ivy and Duren, you are risking some of the future. You are taking that risk. Doesn't mean that you are ruining the future. I don't think it means that at all. I know some people believe that. You're not ruining the future immediately by doing it. You are taking the risk, because if it doesn't pay off for you in the immediate, and then they turn out to be awesome, then you've screwed up. That's why if you trade one of these guys, this entire offseason should then be revamping the entire roster. This roster better be good next year. This roster better make complete sense next year. You better be making the play-in next year. You need to be making these jumps next year if you are basically saying, we don't have time for these guys to be good next year or 2-3 years down the line, so we have to move on from them. Well, you better damn make sure that you're getting other pieces, whether it be in free agency, whether it's through other trades, to make this team good next year. That is what you have to do. It better happen, because if you don't, it's like you failed. You need to do what the Houston Rockets did. That should be the minimum. If you make these moves, you have to be at least what the Houston Rockets were. Whereas if you don't make the play-in because you win 40 games and your confidence is that good, then okay, you get the pass. But they better make a big jump next year if you move on from these guys. The other concern that should come up with trading Jaylen Ivy and Jalen Duren is, and I've brought this up a few times, and I don't know if maybe I shouldn't be labeling them concerns, is just things you need to be taking into account, that if you don't take them into account and you aren't careful, moving them will be a big mistake. I guess I don't know. I guess maybe you could call that a concern, but that's more of the accurate description of what I'm trying to say. If you go back a few years with the Atlanta Hawks, we've referenced this a lot of times. They went all in, and it worked. Got them to the Eastern Conference Finals. They had that really good playoff run. Trade looked like it was the next thing. They looked like they were up and coming. It was over with. Atlanta was here. And ever since then, they've fallen off. They haven't been able to make many moves because they've been up against the salary cap. They haven't been that flexible because they went all in. Now, they were able to get DeJounte Murray. They took that one last swing after they got up against the cap and they were less flexible, and it doesn't look like that last swing was able to save it. If you trade Duren and Ivy to soak up that cap space, and now there's ways you can go around it. You can trade them and also maintain long-term flexibility somehow. You'd have to be really savvy at your job. You'd have to really be great at the job to be able to take all this stuff into account and avoid all these things. That's why we're bringing them up. But I feel like one of the risks to doing it is that you're probably trading Ivy and Duren, or one of them, I should say, for a guy who's on a heavy contract. And if you end up this offseason, like I said, because you feel the pressure of having to win right now, if you end up handing out contracts that are long contracts, you end up acquiring guys who are on long contracts, and let's say, okay, next year you win 35 games. Yeah, that season won. But if you've put yourself in a position now where now you can't improve at all, and you've already given, and that's what you gave up your assets for, now you're screwed again. So you have to make the right move. You have to trade them for the right pieces. And if you do trade them for the right pieces, you also have to you have to make the right moves when it comes to the salary cap, or it all could come crashing down on you and you look like an idiot. You have to, if you're going to do this, and I think they are, if you're going to do this, you have to be smart about how you do it. But these are concerns. These would be the problems with trading Jaylen Ivy or Jalen Duren. These would be my concerns. And again, I think they are aware of these concerns. Whoever they bring in will be aware of these concerns. That's why you need to make sure whoever you bring in is smart about all this. They check off all these boxes, because taking this risk, like based off this past season, the Pistons do not have. We've said this multiple times, and this is the biggest part of all this. This is why I don't feel like a lot of people are fully grasping. Because of how bad this last season went, because you are in year 5 of your rebuild, because Cade took the jump he did individually, because Cade has that extension coming this summer, you do not have the time to wait 2 to 3 years for these guys to develop. You just don't. It's not possible. You have to be good next year. You have to make a massive jump next year. You do not have the time for it, which is why they are in the position of having to do this. So since you've now put yourself in this position, do not double down with multiple mistakes. If you are going to move one of these guys, you better check off all those boxes and make sure you win the trade. Make sure you get pieces in that actually make sense. Because if you do trade for someone and they don't make sense, you've completely screwed the now and the future. Now you're just screwed. Make sure you're maintaining some kind of flexibility long term. That's what you need to consider with all of it. If you do trade Duren and Ivy, those are the concerns and the risk you're taking with trading one of Jaylen Ivy or Jalen Duren. And I think the main thing is, and what every Piston fan is scared of, is that they're going to become awesome down the line. This is what I'm here to say. Just because I think the Pistons should trade Ivy and or Duren does not mean I don't think they're good prospects. I think it's incredibly likely that the Pistons will trade them and they will go on to be really good. I'm willing to bet that. I think they will be really good eventually. Like I said just a minute ago, though, the Pistons have put themselves in a position where now they cannot wait. They cannot wait for that because of how badly they fumbled this rebuild so far. They've screwed themselves now to where now they have to do it. So that's not a concern to me. Whether Ivy or Duren actually become good, I expect them to be. I expect them to be really good. Like I expect them to be pretty good players if they were to get moved on from. What the concern needs to be is the return you get back. Do you put your team in a position, the Pistons franchise in a position where you are heading to the right place, you're taking the next step, and you still have room to grow from that? Because it can be a win-win trade. Like, that can happen. You just got to make sure you execute it. So that's the concerns you have with trading Ivy or Duren. Now, I'm going to bring you why the Pistons should trade Jalen Duren and or Jaylen Ivy when we come back. GameTime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices in view from your seat, all their lower price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% of buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theaters. And this saves people like me who are procrastinators, wait to the very last second. Oftentimes that screws you over. You get bad tickets. You have to pay more. Your seat isn't that great. You get saved with GameTime. You have last-minute deals and sometimes even tickets after the event starts. You have flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Save even more when you choose a section and let GameTime choose the seats for you. Another great thing with GameTime is that you get to see the view of your seat on the app itself. You don't have to worry about getting to the game or the event and be like, oh, God, these seats weren't that great. Shouldn't have gotten these seats. No, you get an idea of what's going to happen, what it looks like right in the app, so you can pick your seats just like that. Also, lower price guarantee or GameTime will credit you 100% of the difference. You take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. You download the app today, GameTime, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with GameTime. I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Now, why should they trade one of them or both of them? I know that's a possibility too, that they could trade both of them. Well, the number one reason is why I ended off the last segment for. And maybe I should have saved that for this segment. But the number one reason is why I saved off or I said in the last segment. And you've screwed this up so badly now where you have to do it. Like, you have to trade one of them. Or if you can somehow make big moves without trading one of them, great. But you've put yourself in a position now where you have to make moves right now to win. And the best, and it looks like the easiest pathway to doing it, the best way to doing it is trading one of them. Like that's the number one reason why, is because you screwed up so badly. Cage getting that extension this offseason, he improved individually. You have to put a really good, you need to be putting a good team around him. You're entering year 5 of the rebuild. You don't have time to wait now. So that's why you have to trade one of them. That's the first thing. The second reason that you should trade one of them is this, and this is a discussion that, again, this is one that we had in the last podcast that I don't think many Pistons fans want to have, but need to accept. This is one of the reasons I know that the front office is considering trading one of them. They might not become as good as people think. And this is the, so I was saying this, I tweeted this out. I'm gonna break it down like this. The idea of Jaylen Ivy's archetype fits next to Cade. The reality of Jaylen Ivy right now does not fit next to Cade. The idea of Jalen Duren as your 5 for the future is great, but that's not the reality of Jalen Duren right now. And combined with the pressure to win right now, combined with the fact, so take that, and then you also combine it with the fact that if we're just being honest, everyone needs to be honest with how this season went. Those two guys did not take the jumps or improve in the areas you expected them to improve on. Ivy did not improve on his jump shot. He did improve a little bit as a finisher, but he's regressed majorly as the season went on. I feel like he took a step back as a decision maker. He's not as even at the end of last year, he's not as comfortable in the in-between area, and he's still really bad defensively. Jalen Duren, you might be able to make the case that he took a step back defensively this year, but at the very least, he's still really bad defensively, and some of his decision making has gotten worse on the offensive end. His shot selection has gotten worse. So these guys who have they have potential and they have those high ceilings, they have not taken like those meaningful steps that you wanted to see. I think if Jaylen Ivy, let's say, came out this year and shot 36% from 3, they wouldn't be considering moving him. If Jalen Duren came out and was just below average defensively instead of just horrible defensively, I don't think they'd be considering moving him, because they'd have reason to believe, okay, he went from this in his rookie year, this the second year. Okay, we can reasonably expect that in the third year, they're going to be better and we can put pieces around them and they'll be a good team next year. If that was the case, they wouldn't be considering moving one or both of them right now. The reason why you have to move one of them now is because you can't sit here after this season and say you believe that they're going to be good next year, that they're going to be ready next year to impact. Because there is a future where I know a lot of people feel like, oh, well, if you just put, quality vets around them, they'll be really good next year. If those guys took steps and improved this year, then yeah, you could make that argument. But I don't feel like the Pistons front office and the Pistons org is comfortable making that assumption, comfortable making that analysis and evaluation based off what they saw from those two guys this year. Those two guys did not make the steps that they expected them to make. Now, again, they were put in bad positions this year. The coaching hasn't been great either. I understand all of that. But not everything can be blamed on the coaching staff. Not everything can be blamed on them. Duren seeming like he had, just doesn't care defensively, that's not on the coaching staff. The fact that Duren just doesn't try to, half the time, it just feels like he's not even trying to protect the rim. Like he doesn't even try to affect shots at the rim. That can't just be blamed on the coaching staff. Like, these guys need to be accountable. Duren needs to be accountable for that. The fact that Ivy is not shooting well on open threes, the fact he's not shooting well on threes, and he's been a streaky shooter since Purdue, that can't all be blamed on the coaching staff. He has to be accountable for that himself. So I think that's in the combined with the first reason and that's the reason why you should trade one of them, because you can't guarantee that they'll be able to impact you winning next year, because they didn't give you enough evidence this year to believe it. And if it was year 2 of the rebuild, if it was year 3 of the rebuild, you 100% would just go into the next year probably and say, we're going to take the bet that, they'll be better and, we'll see what happens. Again, because it's year 5, because of how bad, historically bad, like they are starters on a historically bad team this past year. They weigh some of the blood's on everyone's hands. I said this in the last episode. It's on the owner's hands, it's on the GM's hands, on the coaching staff's hands, and it's on the players. The players are not absolved. The players have contributed to this as well. They're the ones out there on the court playing. So, because of how bad this past season went, you cannot confidently in an offseason where you feel this pressure from every angle, outside and within, to make that next step. You cannot confidently say, we're just going to bring these guys back and just put some role players around them. We'll be much better. You cannot reasonably do that. You can't, or confidently at least do that and sell that vision to everybody. You're just not going to be able to. It's just not going to happen. It's not within reality to do that. And then the last thing I'll say with why you should trade them, I mean, I feel like this is obvious. The best pathway to improving is the best way in trades to get good stuff is you have to give up some assets. And because the Pistons don't have a treasure chest of assets, and when it comes to picks, they don't have what Houston has in the chest of multiple first-round picks. They don't have what OKC has by stockpiling a bunch of picks these years. The Pistons didn't do that. At the beginning of this rebuild, they didn't take on bad contracts to get picks. They went the other route. They handed out contracts to Jeremy Grant. They handed out contracts to Miles Plumlee or Mason Plumlee. They handed out. They didn't take on contracts to get picks. Instead, they traded picks away. They gave big contracts out, and then they didn't trade guys at their peak interest. So this is really, if you want to be honest, like this really starts from the start of the rebuild with why you find yourself in this position where you feel like you have to trade one of them. Because at the beginning, you didn't trade. You didn't take the route of absorbing back contracts to get picks. And then when you gave those contracts out to players, you had to remember they had to move off of picks to get Mason Plumlee off the roster. So they had to move off of picks to get Mason Plumlee off. They didn't trade Jeremy Grant when his value was at its highest, which is reportedly they were offered 2 to 3 first-round picks. They didn't trade him at that point, and then they ended up having to trade him for a 2025 first-round pick from the Milwaukee Bucks. They didn't trade Bojan Bogdanovic at his peak value. They didn't trade Alec Burks at their peak value. So they did nothing. And from an asset management point, they failed at every single spot. So now, instead of taking those advantages throughout the years to stockpile those picks to where maybe this offseason, instead of having to trade one of your young guys or one of your key guys, you could maybe attach a bunch of picks to something, or maybe just one. Maybe you could just attach a bunch of picks to Isaiah Stewart and some salary filler, and you maybe would have been able to do something. Now you don't have that. All you have is Ivy and Duren. It was Stu too. I don't think they're moving off of Arcade. So really, you only have Ivy, Duren, and Stu, and you have this first-round pick this year. That's all the assets the Pistons have. And in order to improve the roster and to make trades, you have to move off of one of them. I mean, that's the easiest explanation. You have to. You're not going to be able to get something good. You're not going to be able to make big moves without giving up something. So that's another reason. And then I think the final one, I'll leave it here and we'll end the podcast. At this point, you have to question the fit of Jaylen Ivy next to Cade Cunningham. I question whether, like I said in the last podcast, people questioning the fit of Jaylen Ivy, I think is the wrong question. The question that should be being asked is Jaylen Ivy good? And has he given you enough reason to believe that he's going to improve as a defender? He's going to become a consistent three-point shooter, like 36% above, consistent three-point shooter? Has he given you a reason that he's going to become a much better finisher? Has he given you a reason to believe he's going to become a much better decision maker? Is he giving you the reason to be like all this stuff? Like you have to, it's not just the fit with Ivy for me anymore. The reason the fit is a question is because Ivy's not good enough. That's the reason why the fit's questioned by me. If Ivy was as good, like if the idea of Ivy was what he is now, like the archetype of an off-ball guard who can attack defenses and finishes at the rim and make the right plays out of kick out and makes the right decisions and can knock down open threes at a high clip. Like, yes, obviously that fits next to Cade. Very obviously, you're talking about a really good player. But Ivy does none of those things right now. He doesn't hit the three at a high enough clip. He's not finishing at a high enough clip. He's not making the right decisions a lot of times, and he's really bad defensively. Like that's the conversation people aren't really wanting to have, and that's why the Pistons are considering trading him, and it's why James has him fifth, and it's why it seems like he's going to be the one moved. It's not because does Cade Cunningham and Ivy, the ideas of them fit? Yeah, the ideas of them fit together, but at this point, the front office and everyone, a lot of people involved are questioning not the fit The reason why the fit is being questioned is because Ivy is not good enough. He has not been good enough. That's what they're questioning, and that's why it seems like he's going to be the most likely one to be moved. And I understand that. So there's the arguments. That's the whole perspective from both sides of the arguments, I think. Let me know if you guys have anything else to add on to this, where you guys fall in this argument and the perspectives in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Cougar Hill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for another for helping us get, I should say, my goodness, helping us get to 8,000 subscribers. Just absolutely big time, man. Can't say how much I appreciate you guys' support. Hit that 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. I'll catch you guys later. Stay safe out there. And until next time, peace out.